Your gut is meant to be a silent player, working in the background of your awareness. So if it's speaking to you regularly, it's likely it's upset.
Today we kick off our gut health series, talking about why fibre is so fundamental for whole body well-being and tackling your most frequently asked gut health questions. I'm Isabelle, Head of Nutrition at Well Nutrition.
And I'm Dr. Rabia, consultant gastroenterologist with a special interest in the gut-brain connection.
Dr. Rabia, 96% of the population is not getting enough fibre, but its impact spans way beyond digestive health. How is gut health linked to whole body health?
Our individual organs are not isolated from one another. Think of them like instruments in an orchestra, where your health is the music that is created. And if our organs are to harmonise and produce good music or good health, they need to communicate with one another, and they do this through pathways. Put simply, it's the two-way communication between the gut and the brain occurring continuously via 4 key systems: our immune system, our hormonal health, our microbiome, and our nervous system. And why this matters is because if something goes wrong in one of those 4 systems, you can get symptoms in your gut, everything from bloating to a disrupted bowel habit. But what's really interesting is you can get symptoms outside the gut, things like brain fog, chronic fatigue, skin issues, and even problems with your immune health and recurrent colds. And this is not new news. We've known this for over 2,000 years. If you go back to a famous quote by Hippocrates, the Greek physician, he said that all disease begins in the gut. And so what we know in modern medical practice now is that this is in fact true, but there are things that we can do and change in our lifestyle in order to impact this and improve our overall body health, including the impact of chronic stress, which is mostly driven by hormones in the body.
And talking of stress hormones, gut health is also closely linked to female hormonal health.
That's right. The gut talks directly to our feminine hormonal system and vice versa. It's a two-way street. And some really easy examples I think everyone can attest to is, firstly, during our natural period and our menstrual cycle, around the time of our bleed, many women will notice a tendency towards a looser poo or a looser bowel habit, so-called period poos. And the reason they notice that is because of these signaling molecules called prostaglandins. These signaling chemicals are essentially set up to cause contraction of our uterus and enable blood to shed from the womb. But the smooth muscle of the gut is also under contraction. And so what that does is it moves the poo along the tract, draws water in, and leads to a smoother and more frequent bowel habit. The other example is for women who have been pregnant and have noticed really commonly they can suffer from constipation. One of the reasons that is because of high levels of progesterone. Now, progesterone actually does the opposite in that it causes smooth muscle to slow down, and so our gut slows down because it actually relaxes smooth muscle in the gut. And so you can see how these hormones at key points in the cycle of our feminine lives are really impacting both our uterus and our female hormones and also our gut. And so I think it's just important for women to know that during their monthly cycle, when they're pregnant, and in peri and postmenopause, it's a good time to pay attention to your gut health as well.
And when it comes to nourishing the skin, the microbiome also plays a role.
Yes, absolutely. The skin is our largest organ, and it's our external barrier to the world. There are so many similarities between this external barrier and our gut lining, which is our internal barrier. And the gut is exposed to the environment at the mouth and at the bottom, unlike some of our other internal organs. And so the microbiome, which is this ecosystem of microorganisms, displays on the skin and in the gut, and there's crosstalk between the two. What it means is if there's an imbalance in the microbiome, something we call dysbiosis, and that beneficial bacteria is in lower numbers or composition or even diversity, it can lead to disruptions in immune regulation, inflammation, and metabolic health. And all of that has been associated in the literature with skin conditions such as acne, psoriasis, and eczema. So in short, inflammation in is inflammation out.
So as you said, inflammation affects metabolism, and would you say also longevity?
Yes, it's really interesting. On kind of the level of the organelles in our mitochondria, the gut has a huge impact in mitochondrial function. And these are like the batteries of our cells and the powerhouse of our metabolism. And they impact cell longevity and cellular aging.
Yeah.
So this is the interaction between our gut and metabolism, but also there's another level in which it operates. The gut produces via our bacteria these other signaling molecules called short-chain fatty acids. And these compounds are produced from our dietary fibre, and they have an important role to play in our immune function, in inflammation, and of course, metabolic health. And so in order to increase your short-chain fatty acid production, you can do something really easily with your diet, and that's to increase dietary fibre from plant-based foods. The more dietary fibre, the more the bacteria can convert that into short-chain fatty acids, and these compounds have been shown to be very beneficial when they're circulating in the system.
So let's break down what the microbiome is exactly.
The microbiome is an ecosystem, a rich and diverse ecosystem, much like a rainforest. It contains bacteria, viruses, and fungi that number in the trillions. And what's important about all of these microorganisms is they're not just passive sitting there in the forest. They actually have diversity, composition, and function because they produce signaling molecules. And that is how this dynamic, live environment is influencing our health.
And a common misconception we hear in consultations is that probiotics and prebiotics are the answer to support gut health. But they're not the only part of a picture.
That's right. I don't think there is a single thing that will, completely manage gut health. I think it's a mosaic of lots of different things. So perhaps we could break down the pieces of that mosaic. So probiotics, what are they? They are live, beneficial microorganisms that you can ingest either through a food product such as a live yogurt or a capsule probiotic. And when you take these, they're there to maintain and improve gut health. Prebiotics, by contrast, are the non-digestible fibers that beneficial bacteria actually need to ingest in order to function well. Examples include onions, garlic, and unripe bananas because they contain resistant starch. So that's probiotics and prebiotics, and then you have fibre. And fibre is a type of carbohydrate that is either not digested or partially digested in the small bowel, which is the 4 meters of tubing in the center of your belly. And because fibre is a carbohydrate that's not digested, it passes to your large bowel where your bacteria can then break it down into signaling molecules called the short-chain fatty acids, which we described earlier. And in doing so, those have functions for the gut, as well as fibre helping to move the poo along. Fibre really is the foundation of a balanced diet that will enable, especially Western diets, to move towards a better balance in our gut ecosystem. And we just don't get enough of it. We know that we don't get enough fibre because our Western diets don't contain it. So we have to be consciously incorporating it into our diet. And it forms part of the Mediterranean diet, which has a lot of research to say that it not only improves gut health, but also manages certain gut health diseases, such as irritable bowel syndrome or IBS. So this includes things that are really rich in omega-3, olive oil, oily fish, nuts, whole grains, and then alongside vegetables, pulses, and plant-based fibres.
So what you've covered, Dr. Rabia, is so interesting because we often see in consultations individuals who may think of managing their gut symptoms or their discomfort by avoiding a whole food group such as fibre. And we know that this can impact on their gut health in the long term, thinking of, as you pointed out, the microbial composition, the abundance, the diversity. What are your thoughts?
I see this often in my clinical practice, that people exclude whole food groups. And the reason makes sense. When you start to eat fibre, you may notice that you don't tolerate it as well. And one of the common symptoms is bloating, especially if you have a condition called irritable bowel syndrome, or IBS. This is a condition where you get discomfort associated with a change in bowel habit over a period of 6 months or more. And it's really common in women, and it affects 1 in 10 in the UK population. If you have IBS, not to be confused with IBD, which is inflammatory bowel disease, IBS can often make you not tolerate fibre because fibre comes in different forms. And so my advice is, if you suffer from discomfort or bloating and you're looking to improve fibre, either through your diet or a supplement, to start low and go slow. Because the slow incorporation of fibre will allow your microbiome and your symptoms to adjust. And then you don't have to exclude food groups, which in the long term can lead to malnutrition and can often also lead to fear around eating or disordered eating behaviour.
So how then do you know that your gut is unhealthy?
Great question. Your gut is meant to be a silent player, working in the background of your awareness without drawing too much attention. So if it's speaking to you regularly, it's likely it's upset. Persistent symptoms such as reflux, whole heartburn, bloating, changes in bowel habit, or pain in your belly can indicate that something is out of balance. The most important thing is that if these are new and persistent for you, is to seek medical attention and make sure that there's nothing medical going on. And once you've excluded that, it could be that lifestyle factors such as stress and diet, as well as exercise and sleep, are playing a pivotal role in the way your gut is talking to you.
And how badly do antibiotics damage gut bacteria? And what foods would you say can help recover the impact antibiotics can have on gut health?
It's important to know that antibiotics don't wipe out the microbiome. They are such important medications that target harmful bacteria when we have an infection. However, what they do is sometimes lead to an imbalance in the beneficial bacteria of the gut, and over time this can cause symptoms. And the effect of this depends on the type of antibiotic, the dose of the antibiotic, and also the person's microbiome that the antibiotic is going into, and how rich and diverse that microbiome is. And so when you take an antibiotic, particularly if it's over a few days in length and duration, it's important to think about how you can protect and make a more robust microbiome. Most people's microbiomes are incredibly resilient and will bounce back after an antibiotic without any intervention. But the things that you could do include having a diet that's more rich in plant-based fibre and fermented foods such as kimchi and kefir and Greek yogurts that are free of sugar. And including that variety in your diet will lead to variety and diversity in the microbiome as a kind of mirror, and that will lead to resilience against antibiotics. The other thing you could do is take a probiotic, which would also include those live beneficial microorganisms to ensure that the microbiome is robust enough to handle any threat.
Okay, wonderful. And in general, what are the fastest ways, would you say, to improve gut health?
I don't know if there is a single fast way. In fact, no quick fix, exactly. I think in some ways our fast, modern-paced living is somewhat of a trigger for our gut health, because our gut health is such a primitive part of our body that's designed to function best in the rest and digest portion of our nervous system, our so-called parasympathetic nervous system. And so if I was to say, what is my recipe for good gut health, I would say probably one of the foundations we've discussed a lot is diet. And the diet that's been proven again and again in the evidence is Mediterranean diet. So one that's rich in olive oils, oily fish, high in omega-3, fruits, vegetables, pulses, plant-based fibers, nuts and seeds. And that is really, if you shift towards that, even 80% of the time, you will naturally lead to better, robust gut health. The second is managing stress. You know, it's that chronic, fast-paced way of living that has this influence on our nervous system that puts our body into fight-to-flight mode and means that our nervous system is dysregulated. And so finding ways to regulate your nervous system, such as slow, deep breathing and noticing the impact of stress on your gut, will lead to more healing. And the last thing is prioritizing good quality sleep and exercise. Exercise releases endorphins, but there's also associations with regular exercise and improvements in the microbiome composition, and definitely good quality sleep, because your gut also works on a circadian rhythm. And so these are the founding principles of good gut health.
Thank you to our guest expert in gut health, Dr. Rabia Topan. There's so much to unpack when it comes to digestive health, from mind to mood, skin to stress, and we've got much more in store. Be sure to like and subscribe so you don't miss a single episode.